You have to get into the hang of creating content. Yep. Whatever you're going to make now is bad. Like when you turn on an old faucet. When you turn it on at first, you're going to get shitty water coming out, but the longer you leave that faucet on, the cleaner and better quality you get. There's no one more fun to hang out with than comedians. We don't take anything seriously. Think about it.
Yes,
these people
really isn't.
Think all day long on how to make other people laugh. Your goal is, as a comedian, is to try to make the onstage person the same as the offstage person. People might be like, oh, you're talking about the same topics. It's like, yeah, but I'm talking about it and you want to hear my perspective. The whole point of stand-up in my head is you're going to make them uncomfortable and then you're going to break that tension. Yeah. Trust me, wherever I bring us, we'll get to where we're trying to go.
Welcome, Jimmy Clifford.
Howdy.
Jimmy Clifford's a comedian here in Austin. Very funny. I've seen him perform probably 3 or 4 times at Creek in the Cave.
Hell yeah.
And I think you have a really prolific comedy mind because I see you doing stuff online. I know you have this podcast and I see you working at Creek. Mm-hmm. What is your whole comedic expression? What are all the things you like to do?
So I love comedy more than anything. I've been a comedy nerd since I was 8 years old. And I've always just wanted to be a part of it. I love stand-up comedy, and it's like my favorite thing in the world. That's why when I'm working at the Creek, whether I'm doing tech or security or whatever the hell, I just get to watch shows, and it's the best job ever because I can literally just sit around and watch comedy. So I love that. But in terms of like what I want to do, I just want to be able to be creative in whatever way I can. So I like podcasts. We make podcasts. I like sketches.
Do you do one podcast? Is it your own podcast? Do you do multiple?
I do one podcast. It's called The Jimmy Clifford Show. It's with my friend Greg DePaul and JJ. And
I don't think I know Greg. He must be here though.
Yeah, Greg. So Greg's been around as long as I have in Austin, and he started with doing stand-up, and then he realized that wasn't really for him. So we started putting more effort into the podcast, and Greg's gonna get into acting, and we have like web series ideas that we're going to start doing coming September. We have like sketch ideas. We're going to just start pumping out content like crazy. That's cool. Because now we finally have a team, so it's a lot easier to like distribute the workload when you have people that are on board with you and want to do the same things. You know what I mean?
Hell yeah. How'd you get there? That's the 0 to 1 jump that nobody can get to.
Yeah, well, it's just you got to be honest with yourself in terms of how much work you're willing to put in. Like there's so many people I talk to at the Creek or at other open mics or shows, and they're like, yeah, dude, I want to do this. I have this idea for a sketch. I have this idea for a sketch. And then you hit them up day of and you're like, okay, you ready to make it? And they're like, yeah, let's just push it back next week. And it's like, dude, what are we doing? Yeah. So there's a lot of people that just talk. And when you meet people that like do, then you get excited about it. And then, once you start making content on a regular basis, it just becomes kind of like second nature. Yeah. And it's like, oh, we have to do one because, we've always done one. It's not like now I have to go shoot a podcast. It's like I'm already used to shooting podcasts.
It's
I'm already used to writing. Exactly.
You do it every day.
Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the thing that people don't really understand, in my opinion, is like if you want to be productive and create content, you have to just create content because people get in their minds also with like this perfectionist idea of like, oh, I won't be able to shoot it quite the way that I want to, but it's like, you'll never be able to shoot it the way you want to until you do it. Like when I started,
and that's how you're going to be able to do it the way you want, is just by getting it out there.
Oh, for sure. Cause like my shit was horrible at the beginning. I remember during the pandemic, I was like, oh, I'm not able to perform. I can't do open mics and get on stage every day. So I'm going to write a joke every single day and
just
post
for reference,
online.
how long have you been in comedy now then? If you
6
were
years.
Oh, damn, hell yeah.
Yeah, I started when I was 18 in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania.
You're 24?
25.
25. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And a head start.
Yeah, well, I mean, it feels like a head start to some people, but then like I'll look at Eddie Murphy. He was on SNL at 18. You know what I mean? Or like Pete Davidson's been doing comedy since he was 14. It's all just kind of wherever.
I think I saw TV till I was 21.
Yeah, exactly. So, but it's just, you have to get into the hang of creating content because whatever you're going to make now is bad. Yep. Like there was a great quote that I heard from Ed Sheeran where he's like, the way that I think of songwriting is the same way as like when you turn on an old faucet. When you turn it on at first, you're going to get shitty water coming out, but the longer you leave that faucet on, the cleaner and better quality you get.
Because you get refined in the practice of it.
Yeah, and you learn how to do it.
You learn how to do it, even if it's just like, I need this phone, this camera, this mic. When I try to produce it on this setup, the HDR overexposes the footage. And,
sure.
Like there's all these little lessons, and it's that commitment to doing it again and again and again that's how you actually start building a content library that's valuable.
Totally. Plus, you mentioned the equipment. A lot of people will be like, oh, I can't do a podcast because I don't have any money for mics or I don't have money for a computer. It's like, dude, your phone is more powerful as a camera and a computer than Alfred Hitchcock ever used.
And a mic. It's a great mic.
It's a great mic. Just plug in your little iPhone headset and you can use that because it's a clear audio. And all you're trying to do is get better at whatever this craft is, whether it be podcasting, whether it be stand-up, whether it be creating sketches or shows.
So what is it? Is it this is something I've been thinking about as I've been doing more stuff online. I've been making these like little food videos and rants.
Yeah, I saw them. They look really good.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, I have fun making them, and I've always kind of made them. And but they're not really funny. They're just an expression. They're something creative that I like to do. They're satisfying just in and of themselves. So the question is, now that we're having all these different platforms for comics and entertainers to be able to express themselves, what is really being expressed from a podcast versus a mic, like a stand-up, versus a web sketch? Is there something common across all those? Is it just your personality? Is it just your interests? What is being expressed that's shared amongst all those things? Because I'm interested in all of those.
So in terms of the difference between those, have you ever heard of Marshall McLuhan?
Mm-hmm.
So Marshall McLuhan had this idea. He was like this, I don't want to say philosopher, but like, thinker from, the 20th century. But he said the medium is the message. So whatever you say in a text message is going to give an inherently different vibe to people than if you said it in an email, because they're different. Yeah. Like if I text you, hey, what's good? You'd be like, okay, you just text back. But if I send you an email that said, hey, what's good? You'd be like, what is this? You know what I mean? It's weird.
Yes.
So stand up, you have to have a laugh every 15 seconds because whether people like to admit it or not, comedy audiences, when they're sitting down, they're built into that rhythm.
It's a rhythm. Yes. I was going to say a wave, but it's a rhythm.
It is a rhythm. And so like when you're hearing 5 comedians before and then this one guy gets up and he does something different.
And then it disrupts it.
It disrupts the rhythm. So it sounds, you're already like,
kind of clanky note.
Yeah, so, and it makes the audience a little bit more uncomfortable, and it makes the comedian a little bit more uncomfortable. You can get past that if you're someone like, Chappelle, where you're just so experienced, you know how to control the crowd, you know where all the punchlines lie, and you can use that silence and that like awkwardness to your advantage. But when you're starting out, I think it's important to kind of stick to keeping up with that rhythm, especially because we're doing showcases and you want to keep the show going. You don't want people to bail out.
Even if you can, though, because sometimes people come up with such energy and there's such a vibe. And if you can't match that same energy, you can't bring that same emotion, then you're going to bomb the room.
Totally. Exactly.
I mean, not in a good way. Like you're going to shut down the room.
100%. And you have to like be present because stand-up is a very present thing. So let's say something crazy happens right before you get on stage, and then you go on stage and you're like, so dishwashers are weird. You know what I mean? People are still thinking about the crazy thing that already happened, and you have to address that. Addressing it is going to be like, I can't even focus on what you're talking about. Someone was just, giving birth on stage, whatever. And
that's its own art form that I never really appreciated until I started doing open mics, was comics' ability to riff off what the last guy did. And that's the communication, the conversation, is that you have this way that you've been presenting on stage. If I can take that energy and merge that into the energy I'm trying to bring, then it flows. Yeah. But if I just come in with some like left field topic, and it doesn't acknowledge anything that's been said previously, then it is like, it's like music with a bad note or something.
Totally. Stand-up is this thing where people, the audience, although they understand that we write jokes ahead of time, they want it to feel like we're just talking to them. And so just like if you were in a conversation with a group of people and something crazy happened and then your friend goes, dishwashers are crazy. You're like, dude, let's focus on this for a minute. You know what I mean? This is wild. Yeah. So when you can go in and you can address something that happens in the room, I think it really helps people suspend that disbelief and be like, oh, he's going to just talk to me. It's not like he even has material. He might be a funny guy, but he's just going to talk to me.
Do you think there is some element of it that is just talking, though? Because you are trying to get into the same feeling and headspace as when you originally wrote it. So like if you have an idea and you're trying to communicate that in a funny way, I mean, I suck at this. I haven't done comedy enough to like actually have a strong opinion here, but the times where I've felt in the zone are when I was speaking on stage, it was the exact same feeling as writing it. It was a similar feeling as writing
because
it.
what your goal is as a comedian is to try to make the onstage person the same as the offstage person. You're just trying to be honest.
Yes.
And the honesty is what's the most funny part about it. You know what I mean? So that's why, people might be like, oh, you're talking about the same topics. It's like, yeah, but I'm talking about it and you want to hear my perspective.
Yeah.
All comedy is taking a perspective on a certain stance.
Yes.
If you don't have that perspective, then you don't have a joke.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So the importance of doing stand-up and being honest and being present in that moment and making it seem like I'm just talking, even though that I'm not, is the craft, in my opinion.
And I think that's why that craft attracts similar types of people. Like, I think comedians are very similar in how their minds work, where they get annoyed easily at things that they think are not honest or not real or fake, or, one of the things I listened to your podcast with Nate De La Hoya, and one of the things that you said in there is that comedians were fighting the blue-haired crowd or something. We used to be fighting this like ultra-religious old white guy, whatever. Now, and I just love that idea that what we're fighting against is nonsense. With nonsense, we're going to show you how stupid this way of thinking is by creating these comparisons or whatever, whatever a joke is.
Yeah, I think the best way to write a joke and the best jokes are just topics that we all know, but looked at in a different way.
Yeah.
So I'll take a topic and I'll write down maybe 15 or 20 questions. Because what I love to do is I like to write monologue jokes. So I'll just look through the newspaper. I'll see something that catches my eye. I'll write down the exact headline, and then I'll write down 3 or 4 keywords about it, and then I'll ask myself questions. So, okay, for example, I wrote a joke the other day where I said a high school football coach was recently fired for praying after football games. And I'm like, okay, obviously the question is why did he what was he praying about, or why was he fired just for praying? And then you think, oh, it's a public school, so you have to keep religion separate. That's the obvious answer. But I'm like, what if they weren't angry that he was praying? What if they were angry what he was praying about? So then I was like, so a high school football coach was recently fired for praying after football games. He said, "Dear Lord, baby Jesus, please send me some more black kids." You know what I mean? Because it makes sense. It's we want to be good at the game and whatever. Really so it's a silly joke, but it's just looked at from a different angle.
And it's got a little bit of a twist in there. And jokes are so complicated. They're simple. But they're complicated. I think one of the things that I struggle with is just in conversation, I feel pretty comfortable throwing out any idea. And I feel like I have ideas that are funny enough to get laughs in conversation. But translating that into a stage performance, that is its own unique challenge.
It makes it much more difficult because one of the things that you don't have in the stage performance that you do in conversation is context. So let's say you're talking to your family.
To build that context.
Yeah, you have to build it. So let's say you're talking to your family and you're like, oh, everybody knows I'm a big cat guy. You're being sarcastic because your family knows you have a dog. But the stage, everyone in the audience has no idea.
Don't know that. Right.
So it's not funny anymore. Right. You have to build in that's why whenever I see comics that I'm like, they're able to set the tone of who they are early. Yeah. They're the best ones because then we can pick up on all those little jokes that might just be throwaways. They're not big punchlines, but it's still funny and he keeps me laughing throughout the whole set.
And you're resonating with it because you're understanding more and more of that person. So that's one of the things that I think would probably be harder as you become more successful is to find that authenticity. Because if everyone knows who you are, they're just gonna laugh at everything you say. And you hear that with bigger comics where they're like,
yeah. But you know what's interesting is there are some comics that know that. And so, for example, whenever Chris Rock will go into the cellar and do a set, he'll bomb for the first 5 minutes because he goes, it doesn't matter who you are. If you're bombing, you're bombing. And it'll bring everybody back down. They're like, okay, he's a regular person again. Down, And then he'll go into the material that he wants to work on. So then he can see, does this have legs or not? So then when he goes out to do a theater, everyone's losing their mind at Chris Rock, but he's also giving jokes that work regardless. And so you have both of it, and it hits even harder.
Can you imagine having so much good material that you'd be comfortable being like, oh, I'm just going to bomb, and then I'll bring it back up? It's
I've been there are people at the Creek that I see do it all the time. I mean,
who are your favorite regular Creek performers that are local here in Austin, not visiting? Guys people wouldn't have heard of before.
So I think that the people that I like are very different. Casey Rocket,
Oh, Casey.
hilarious.
Yeah.
I mean, and
His energy, his vibe.
yeah. And what's great about Casey is like, as someone, as a comic, as a tech guy that sits in the back and watches every set, he changes it up constantly. Like, you know, I'll have jokes. Well, he'll have jokes that he'll bring in over and over again, but like he'll do it in a different way. He'll do it in a different part. He'll add more punchlines.
I got COVID shot in my eyes.
Oh my God.
40-40.
He's crazy.
I don't want to butcher his joke. That I won't butcher it.
He's crazy, and it's just so entertaining to watch.
Yeah.
Another one, Miles Johnson.
Miles has a great vibe.
Oh
yeah.
my God, Miles is a killer, dude.
Yeah.
I mean, one of my the biggest compliment I can give Miles is, have you ever been to the Heckle Mic?
No, I haven't been.
Okay,
to it.
so every Sunday there's this thing called Banana Phone, and it's
Yep.
run by Candace Medina. And
Yep.
the way it works is it's a regular open mic, 4 minutes, but after 1 minute of uninterrupted stage time, the audience is encouraged to heckle you.
That's awesome.
And so, you know, basically, it's at 10 o'clock on a Sunday night, and it's only comedians. Sometimes you get people hanging out from the show earlier, so you get some real people in there, but they're always too scared to actually say anything. So it's just comedians yelling insults at you. And typically it's your friends.
Yeah.
So it just gets so out of hand, and it's so much fun. And what's good is it's like, this is my favorite part, is you'll yell out a heckle, and the heckle might bomb. And if it bombs, everyone turns to you and shits on you for the bad heckle. And so it's just like, it's pure justice, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And, you know, comics will be like, oh, this is bullshit. I only get 1 minute and then they just heckle me. I can't even go through my jokes. What's the point? Bro, I've seen Miles Johnson go up there and murder with strictly material. It's like he's killing with the jokes so hard that nobody even wants to heckle. They just want to keep listening. And that's when you win. You beat the heckle mic.
Right. Yeah, I mean, he's got his own vibe. Like, I'd say Casey's vibe is like really high energy, really bringing a lot of like, it's energy. And Miles is like a lot less energy, but not less funny.
Silly. Just silly.
Very silly. But so this is something else I wanted to ask you. What is the relationship? So like roasting is an element of comedy that I've been thinking about a lot and trying to figure out, because sometimes I love it. Like when you nail someone and it's perfect and it's hilarious,
Yeah.
it's really good. Other times it's fucking mean. And it's just like, what are you trying to like make that guy cry? Oh my God.
Yeah.
And so like, what is that line? Why sometimes do I look at it and I'm like, oh, I would like, look at him. He's going to cry. And I like, you know, you start feeling bad for the guy. And other times you're just like laughing along with him. And I can't even figure out what is the difference.
I think it's two things. One, like Patrice O'Neill said, good jokes and bad jokes come from the same place. And so, like, even if someone says something that sounds really mean, because of the fact that it's a roast, you know that they were going for the laugh and they might have failed. And so that's just something I always try to keep in mind. Plus, a roast is more than just the jokes. I think it's really important to have that dynamic between the roasters, even if they don't know each other. If they can have like a good rapport and a good banter, it makes it more fun, and you realize, oh, that person's not taking it very seriously.
Yeah. And that's a lot of what comedy is
Yeah.
being able to roast yourself and just like, you know, like come up with, because you're the one on stage, you're talking, you're like got a light on you, your voice is amplified. So you got to be willing to take some hits.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, it's kind of like you expect to take the hits. Like when I go up at the heckle mic, I'm hoping that someone has a joke that hits me so good. I'm just like, yo, but use that in my act.
I was
now.
going to
You
say,
know what I
like,
mean?
if you
Thank
have a really good joke about yourself, that's like gold.
Yeah, I just record it and I save it. I write it down. I'm like, we're going to use that later.
Yeah.
And so, you know, that's something that people have to keep in mind. Also, understanding like nothing is ever personal, especially with comedians. Like, we're just fucking around. You know what I mean? And if you take it personally.
Do you think there are like comic vendettas? Like, have you seen any of this drama between Bobby Lee and I think it's Brendan Schwab?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Like, is that all performative, or do you think that they're real vendettas? Because I've had some run-ins, but, you know, like, I forget those things in, like, 12 hours or whatever until they happen again.
Yeah. It's kind of like this is show business. And even if, let's say, they don't like each other, they're both people that have shows, and they're like, this is going to help us.
Yeah.
So, like, one of my biggest comedy influences of all time is Howard Stern. And he knows if there's a fight, people are going to be interested.
Yep.
And it's going to help Brendan's show. It's going to help Bobby's show. It's going to just keep it relevant. And that's what I see whenever I see that stuff. Because, if they really had an issue with one another, they're not going to do it on the podcast. They're going to walk up to it. Brendan's an MMA fighter. He's going to walk up and say, hey, what's the deal? I mean, I guess it's LA, so it's a little bit different, but
No, there is something where we're all in the same industry. And even if that industry is just entertainment, right? You're just trying to like find ways to like, be informative or funny or whatever. You're just trying to entertain people. And in that way, there's no bad press or whatever they say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because, it's show business. So you can be great at the show, but if you're shit at the business, no one's going to see the show. Yeah. And so it's both. You need to be good at the business to get people to see the show.
So that's another thing I wanted to ask you. I think you, from what I've heard from other people and just seen for myself, you have a great work ethic. And I wonder what feels like the hardest work of all the stuff that you do in entertainment and producing content and doing comedy and podcasts and all that stuff. Where's the work that you don't look forward to?
I mean, I guess editing is a annoying thing I have to do because I'm not an editor. Like, I'm all ADHD. I have trouble just sitting in one spot, especially if it's going to be for a prolonged period of time. But to be fair, like, I don't really feel like I'm working ever because, like, that's one of the reasons that I don't get burned out is because I do a lot of different things. It's not like I'm just doing stand-up where I do 13 open mics every day and then I want to shoot myself. Yeah. But I'm doing the podcast, I'm doing sketches, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. So I have enough variety that I'm constantly interested. Plus, my favorite thing in the world, like the only feeling that gets me going isn't like, oh, I hope this video does well. And because to be fair, once I'm done making the thing, I lose interest in it. Mm-hmm. So I'm bad at like the promotion and getting people to see and how it look. I'm not good at all that. But my favorite feeling in the world is once you made something and then you look back a year later and you're like, oh, I'm so much better than that.
Oh, yeah, that is
feeling,
a great feeling.
It's
that
incredible.
Progress, yeah, totally.
Just knowing like, oh, whatever this work is, it's actually helping. I'm getting better and I can see it. And so I'm sure other people can see it.
That feeling of progress is like, it transcends comedy. It's across all industries and anything you try to develop about yourself. Just feeling that progress is pretty.
Like people go to the gym, they want to look, every time they look good, it's not that they're comparing, oh, I look so good now. It's like, I look so much better than I did before.
Right.
You lose 100 pounds, you might still be fat, but you're like, I was a fat piece of shit before, and now I'm only a slightly fat piece of shit.
Yeah, totally. It's that progress. It's that feeling of progress. But so none of it. Well, what about like going to an open mic? You can't just like walk up to an open mic and get on stage. There's like a good hour or so of, even if it's just driving there, like signing up, waiting, listening to other mics. How, like, if one of my favorite things. Okay, there's a couple thoughts here, but one of my favorite things about content creation is there's zero barrier to entry. You don't need a physical building. You don't need a stage. You don't need a mic. You don't need lights. You just need your phone. You just record and hit publish. So if I was to say some of the work of comedy for me has been actually getting to the point where I can get on a stage and say the 3 minutes or whatever, because I'm very introverted. I'm very homebody type person. And it takes energy just to even go out or whatever, And by the time I've like listened to a mic for an hour and a half and I've been out and about, my energy's like half of what it was when I came out the door. And that's what I was trying to present on stage, was that full energy. And so that's like some of the work for me. But is there work of comedy for you?
So when I first started comedy, I was in New York City. And I was living in the Bronx, and I would have to walk a mile to the closest subway and then take a train all the way down to the Lower East Side. That was about an hour and a half each way. And then you get there, and in New York City, there are 4,000 active stand-up comedians. Holy shit. So the community is huge, huge. And when you meet people, a lot of them are a little apprehensive to talk to you because they're like, yeah, I could talk to you, we could build a friendship, and then you could quit 2 weeks later, and it's all for naught. Like, what's the point? So they're not as open and willing to create a relationship. Whereas I felt the exact same thing you did. I would walk to the mic, I would sit there, I wouldn't really talk to anyone, I don't know anyone, and I'm just waiting for my time to get up. And it's draining. And you have that thing in the back of your mind where you're constantly comparing yourself to all these other comedians. Oh my God, that guy killed. I have to kill just as hard as that guy. Blah, blah, blah. But once I moved to Austin, I was like, okay, I am doing comedy 100%. That's all I'm going to focus on. And I'm just going to try to ingratiate myself within the community. Yep. So I'd go to these mics. Hey, how you doing? My name's Jimmy. Blah, blah, blah. We start talking. And then they see you come back day in and day out, and they realize, oh, you're here for real.
Long term, yeah.
And so you build these friendships. Yep. And then when you start going to open mics,
you're hanging out with your friends.
Yeah. I'm chilling with my buddies until I get to go up, and now I get to put in work, and it doesn't feel like I'm drained at all because I get recharged from my friends.
That's fair. That's totally fair.
And so plus it also takes out the competitiveness, because it's not like I want to crush that guy because I want to prove to all these people I'm a better comedian. It's like, oh, that guy's my buddy and he's working on a new bit. I wonder how I can help him with that bit, what he's doing with it. Maybe that'll help inform my comedy, all these different things. And it starts growing rather than like having that negativity, which will eat you away, man. I mean, you can't be negative, especially in the world when you're asking to be judged. Our industry, we're constantly asking to be judged. Yes. And so if we're judging ourselves among each other, then we're getting it from all angles. Yeah. And so the best thing that I found is just once you find that community of people, that group of friends that you're like, oh, we're all in it together, it totally changes everything.
I think that would totally change the game. And then you're kind of like, I don't know. There's also just comedians rub off on each other, just like anyone does, right? Whoever you spend time with, you're the average of the 5 closest people you spend time with. Have you heard that?
Makes sense.
It's just like you're the average of your 5 best friends, basically. And yeah, you start thinking more comedically, and you start seeing the punchline, you start seeing the joke, and you start like competing in conversation where you want to be saying the funny thing. Yeah. And if you're not hanging out with those guys, that muscle, it totally atrophies. It totally atrophies.
Yeah. It's like, have you ever, Quentin Tarantino in a podcast or interview or something, he was like, I was the best filmmaker among all of my friends, but I was in Loserville. Like, I needed to get to people that are better than me. Yeah. So then I can start getting, they might still be better than me, but I'm going to be better than myself every single time. It's like running a race with fast people versus slow people. You could win every slow race, but your time's not going to get better. Yes. So that's how I think about it. Plus, it's just, there's no one more fun to hang out with than comedians. We don't take anything seriously. Think about it.
Yes,
these people
really isn't.
Think all day long on how to make other people laugh.
And they're willing to say the ridiculous thing. That is my favorite thing about comics. So my first exposure was probably 2016 or so. I was living in LA, and I was listening to Joe Rogan's podcast. He was always talking about this place, the Comedy Store. Like, I was like, okay, let's go see what the Comedy Store is. And it took about 3 seconds to get hooked. And then before you know it, I'm like there on Tuesday, Thursday. Now I'm there Monday, Wednesday, Thursday. Now that, I'm like I'm every time I'm in LA, I was actually living in Utah at the time and going out there. Every time I'm in LA, I'm like going out there and I'm meeting people. And the thing that I just loved was this front area. Well, there's a few hangs. There was a hang in the parking lot, in the bar in the front, and then the kitchen in the back, all sorts of hangs. But in those hangs, people were just saying shit, crazy shit. And I was like, nobody talks like this. Like, I was working at a corporate job, just doing the business thing. You can find some funny people in there, but like nobody is as open and playful as comedians.
Totally. And like, just like you were saying with those different hangs, the same thing is at the Creek in the Cave. You walk into the back patio.
Absolutely.
And the way I like to describe it is it's like a lake. And each different conversation is a different lily pad. So you can go swim out in the lake, and then if you get tired by yourself, just hop on a lily pad, talk to people, because it doesn't matter if comedians are in a circle and just some random guy walks up and stands there, we're going to include you, because regular people in minds of comedians are more important because, we can actually try some stuff on you guys without even realizing it. And if it gets a laugh, then we're going to add it to the act. And another great thing about hanging out with comedians is it helps your act. Like the other day, I was hanging out with my friend Zahid. He's hilarious. He's a guy from Houston, and we're just talking. And he goes, "Dude, you should put that. Have you done that on stage?" And I was like, "No, I've never even said that before." And he goes, "Write that down, do it on stage." And now it's a bit that I'm like really excited about, and I would have never even thought to say that on stage.
How long does your material last? How long do you do a bit before you either get bored of it, or you just, it's always a growing library? Like, do you ever retire material yet? I mean, 6 years is like pretty good amount of time. You're probably not saying the stuff you
There's
were.
jokes that I don't do anymore just because I don't think they're as funny as the jokes that I do now.
Yeah.
And but like I would never retire a bit that worked just because I was tired of it. Like I think another aspect of the craft of stand-up is performing, and just like, you know, if you're on Broadway, you have to do 8 shows a week, and you have to make each show
it every time
feel like the first time you ever done that show.
Yeah.
And stand-up's the same way.
Yeah.
And so like I'm a big believer in constantly refining the act, whereas there are a lot of comedians that's just, you know, new material. Like that's one of the things that makes
very interesting. Keep going.
One of the things that makes Miles great is that dude writes constantly, and he's doing all these weird different things, and they don't really connect, but they're hilarious bits on their own. Yeah. Whereas like I want to feel when I start my set to when I end my set. I don't want to be the comedian. I want to be Jimmy. Yeah, and the only way for me to do that is to have like a topic or a series of topics that relate to each other. They have cohesive transitions, and it never feels like this is a joke. It just feels like I'm talking to.
Yeah, just like you're talking. So there's 2 elements there, though. There is the joke writing, like the actual material, and then there's the performance, like how you're behaving on stage. How are you capturing attention, holding it? What is the vibe you're bringing? What is the energy? And I think those are 2 good comparisons, Miles versus Casey, because they're both hilarious, but they have very different vibes. I think they have very different vibes.
Totally.
Like, especially just in terms of body language. Casey's all over the stage.
Miles
kind of
stays
in the one place, yeah.
Yeah, he just puts the mic right in the stand and just holds the stand. It's like it's like the difference between
But I'd enjoy watching either of those guys
Robin
equally.
Williams, you know?
Yeah. So there's like, so that's what I was saying. It's like there's this performative element to your comedy or to whatever you're expressing. And you're saying that, is that something you're actively cultivating where you're trying to constantly bring it back to what's authentic, back to what's genuine, back to Jimmy?
Yeah. I will. Okay. So when you're doing stand up, you're in front of a bunch of different types of rooms. Some crowds are going to have so much energy and they're going to give you so much every time. And you're like, boom, boom, boom. And you kind of just feed off of that. And other crowds are going to be totally dead. But you can't control the crowd. You can only control yourself. Yeah. So even if there's a dead crowd, I'm going to come out with as much energy as if it was a packed room.
Yep.
And because you can switch. I've seen rooms of 4 people be a phenomenal audience.
Is that a muscle you built, or do you feel like you've always had that? You seem very extroverted.
I've always been very extroverted, but when I first started, I constantly had that. I need that rhythm of joke, or laugh. And so when I didn't get that, I would like revert and try to match the crowd's energy, which is not good. And I was also in New York, and New York is very different than Austin or even LA, because New York, everyone's sad and they feel like these little sad, fucked up poets. And so you look at guys like Dave Attell, you know, he has the hoodie up, the black zip up hoodie, and he's leaning against the brick wall and he's just kind of saying jokes into the microphone, versus you go to LA and you see a guy like Chris D'Elia who's running all over the place and he's doing this and he's doing that. And I thought, I'm in New York. I have to just rely completely on the material and I can't jump around, even though that I would do that if I was at a party. And when I moved out to Austin, I realized, like, why am I trying to put myself in this box and be this comedian? Whereas why can't I just let the funny version of Jimmy out on stage? And once I kind of figured out how to do that, everything changed for me. And I think the way that I figured out how to do that was I started hosting an open mic. And when you host an open mic, it was outside. It was on Rainy Street. So people are constantly getting distracted. Like, you know, a girl with big titties walks by and every guy in the crowd's like, oh, well, yeah. You know what I mean? And you lose all the attention. So I had to then fall into the Jimmy that would hold court at a frat party or hold court at my family Thanksgiving, where I know there's all these other things going on, but here, listen to me. And once I started doing that, I learned how to start telling my jokes that way and telling them in a way where it's not like, okay, here's time for a joke, everybody. Yeah. You know what I mean? It was just me talking.
But that's a very great way to put it. I mean, holding court is that's what you're doing. And so there's a few thoughts there. One is you're trying to establish a connection with the audience. And if you're coming up, they're going to feed off whatever energy and vibe you're bringing. If you're coming up like all sad and low energy and be like, I don't even want to be here, which you see all the time at open mics.
Constantly.
Like, why are you torturing yourself then? Just like, don't do it. But if you come up with that versus like you're genuinely just maybe you're nervous, maybe you're like excited energy, but you're genuinely happy to be there and it's genuinely what you want to be doing. That is so translatable. And so like it comes back to like what is holding court? How do you capture that attention? Is that through I'm sure there's tips and tricks, but is that just through the energy you bring or I don't know, like.
Well, I think the reason that people will walk up on stage and they're like, yeah, hey, what's up? And they match the crowd's energy is because of their fear of rejection. Yeah. If they go out and they bring all that energy and then the jokes bomb, it's going to hurt twice as much because you put that into it and then you still failed. Yeah. And that's why people are so afraid to do act outs. Because I don't want to act out and be silly and
like being physical on stage, or
do voices or characters or a dance or whatever. Yeah. It's because I'm afraid that it might not work, and then that would be worse than like, let's say I go up and I'm like, I don't even care, and then I don't get any laughs. Well, it's like, of course I didn't get any laughs. I didn't bring any energy up on stage, And so it's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, and it might even be a form of self-sabotage.
Yeah, if you're looking at it logically, it is a form of self-sabotage because you're going out there to try to work on this thing and you're not working on it because you're afraid of how it's going to be perceived.
Yes.
And the thing is, you have no say on how you are perceived. The only thing that you can tell is I'm going to walk up there, I'm going to throw it at the wall. If it hits, great. If it doesn't, I'm going to try something else next time. Yeah. That's the beauty of open mics. There's constant. You can do it every single day.
Yeah.
And you need to in order to get better.
Yeah, but like doing it every single day, I mean, it becomes part of a lifestyle, I guess, where you just know you're going to be there and you know every mic and what time and where you're slotted.
It's like working out.
It really is. It's about consistency. But it would be nice if there was like some kind of more organized or easier way to like know like, okay, at 7:30 p.m., that's just how my brain works. At 7:30 p.m., I'm going to be here or there or there. Or there, you just know it. But it's not really part of the game because it is such a nebulous, like it's such a amorphous community and world of comedy. Any other industry, there's a track to get a job. Like you go to school for this many years, you go and contact this recruiter. The recruiter prepares you for the interview, you pass or fail. Even when you're in a job, there's a path to get promoted, and here's the guidelines and the rules and roles and expectations. It's all spelled out. It's very simple. In comedy, it's like you just sign up at an open mic. Good luck. It depends on where you're located. It depends on who you know. There's like so much unknown about it.
One of the things that brings me great solace, because I went to college. My mom and dad, they paid to send me to a real school where I had a real education, and I was going to get a real job. In? What was it?
Yeah.
Communications with an emphasis on film. So not real, but you know what I mean?
Kind of industry related.
Yeah, it was like, I was working film production for a long time in New York. And I was doing like 60 hours a week there. And then I would try to do comedy on top of it. And it just burns you out. But one of the things that makes me feel confident enough to even enter this industry is the understanding that the funniest people and the most talented people are not the most successful. The only thing that determines success in this world is work ethic. That's it. Look at someone like Brendan Schaub. It seems like a very nice guy. His stand-up sucks. It's bad. It's bad.
I don't want to say.
It's bad. I mean, listen, dude, I love
He's entertaining on
the podcast, but the stand-up's no good. It's dog shit. And
some people are better podcasters than stand-up.
What I'm saying is it doesn't matter, dude. The guy released a special. The guy's doing this podcast. He's bopping on all these other podcasts. He's doing shows every night. He fucking works. And that's why he's successful. Yeah. There's so many funny comics that I know that have no work ethic, and they're never going to get anywhere.
Yep. And it's because they're not actually exposing whatever they got to the world. And it's in that exposure time and time again. It's like we were saying in the beginning of content creation. Yeah, it's going to suck. And you're going to lose your footage. And there's going to be, some like distracting things in the background or whatever that makes the content be not quite as good. And then once you figure out all those things, you iron them out. That's when you start getting like something more polished. And it only comes from reps. It is like working 100%. Out. It's just reps. So plus, how many reps can you get?
With content, you also need to learn how to bomb online.
I feel like the only reason I even attempted YouTube and Instagram and all those things is because I got so comfortable bombing on a stage. The thing that I learned about bombing is it just doesn't matter as long as you're having fun. If you're genuinely, like, how can you not be? You're on a stage. You're the guy holding the mic. You know, you're under the lights. You're holding the mic.
100%.
You should just appreciate that.
When I was mentioning earlier, during the pandemic, I wasn't able to perform, so I would write a joke every single day. I would take my camera, film it right in front of my face, title it Joke of the Day, and release it. I did probably 300 of them.
On social media?
Yeah.
Oh, I haven't seen any of those.
It was an old account.
Okay.
And it was so embarrassing. I mean, these jokes would bomb. And it was only, not my comedian friends, but my regular friends, where they would be the ones watching it. And they're like, you're really putting all your eggs in this whole comedy basket, aren't you? And I'm like, I promise you, it'll work out eventually. Yeah. You know what I mean? And I just learned how to bomb online. So now I'm not afraid of, taking those risks with the content, with the podcast. And then, because I know, hey, even if it bombs, it's not the end of the world.
It's not. It's all just a lesson. It's a learning. You learn why it bombed. Maybe it bombed for a reason that you like. Like maybe you want to keep doing it and just adjusting it. Like I'm not saying just to keep bombing for fun, but like maybe you still really believe in that idea and you just want to try it in a different way.
Yeah, Casey Rocket said that he would bomb for the first 2 years. He would walk up on stage and sing Chandelier by Sia. And then these people are like, what the fuck is this guy doing? But he's like, I know something's funny here, and he's going to figure it out. And he did.
And I think the thing that Miles has, Casey has, and any good comic has is that authenticity where they found out what is interesting about their energy, their vibe. You bring that on stage big time. When you go on stage, it's captivating and you actually have a flow. You have a flow.
Yeah. Well, it's all about that rhythm, right?
Yeah.
Because the audience, the whole point of stand-up in my head is you're going to make them uncomfortable and then you're going to break that tension.
Yeah.
So when I go up, I want them to know I'm like the pilot of an airplane. Trust me, wherever I bring us, we'll get to where we're trying to go. Yeah. So like, let's say I bring up a topic that's a little weird, like homeless people masturbating. People are like, oh, but then all of a sudden I can bring it to that same funny place that people will know to grow and expect from me. Just like when Chappelle's talking about a topic, you're like, I'm gonna give him some wiggle room because I know he's the master and he'll get me there eventually.
Yeah, but sometimes you give a comic your mind. This happened to me the other day at Creek. I won't say who it was or what the joke was, but it was graphic and horrible. And it was like, that's my dog. Chilled it, bud. It was graphic and horrible. And the whole time I'm thinking he's going to turn it around. He's going to turn it around. And it's like watching a slow plane crash. And I'm just like, we're just going to hit the ground. And then he goes off stage. And I'm like, we just hit the ground? Yeah. And I feel like everyone felt the same way. Where it's like, it's so graphic. It's so horrible. You're putting all this images in our head. And we keep thinking it's about to flip into the joke. But it never did.
Well, yeah, that just comes from like, maybe he was trying it out on stage. And he's like, this is a funny topic. But he didn't get to that punchline. And having done that on stage and listened to it, because I always say tape every time you're on stage, watch it back, because you are a lot better of a critic than you are of a performer.
Do you tape? Do you do mic or video or both?
I bring my I have a little GoPro that's on a little stand, and I just put it right in front of the stage, and I watch myself afterwards.
Do you use a tripod for that? Let's
talk
tactical.
It's like this. It's this cheap little $30 tripod that I bought on top, and it's like a little stick, so it's not even a tripod. It's like a little handle that has 3 things that come out, and it just stands on its own. It's great. Yeah. And I'm not looking to like post this stuff, so it's not like the high quality content, but it tells me how I looked on stage, how I delivered the jokes. I could hear the audience laughter where there was no audience laughter, and I can kind of get the vibe of what I'm going for.
I think you need that video element. A lot of mine I would just record on my watch, but then one time I did have a video performance, and I found that people were laughing oftentimes not at what I was saying, but what I was doing. Yeah, where I would just like make some gesture with my hands or whatever, like that would be the thing that got the laugh.
Well, body language is like 80 to 85% of what communication is.
Yeah, it is.
If you're giving up on that 85%, you're only listening to the jokes, then all you're really listening to is the written thing. And you can just look at that on the page. You can see, there's too many words here before the punchline. Cut that. Yeah. Whereas when you're on stage, you can get away with that based on how you're delivering it. You give a funny face, you give some hand gestures, everything. It's all encapsulated because it's a whole performance. We're not rappers. We're not releasing albums. We're in there live doing it at the moment. And to be fair, whenever I see rap live, it sucks. Like
Yeah.
they always play their song with the vocals and then they rap over the vocals. I'm like, this is no performance at all.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
So you have the podcast, you have your stand up. What is your content? What kind of content do you create?
in terms of what?
Just like online. Do you do any content creation?
Yeah.
Like web
yeah,
shorts?
so one of the things that I like to do is I make a lot of videos. Like I said, I write monologue jokes because when I started, I wanted to be a writer for late night TV or maybe hosted late night TV shows. So I like writing those jokes just to get into the repetition of joke writing and getting that muscle. So what I do is I make these little videos where I'm in front of a green screen. I tell the joke based on the news, and it has the pictures pop up, and it's super short, sweet, and easy, in and out. I also do. There's a bunch of different shows that happen at the Creek. So like, there's one show that is called Good Evening. It's run by Jack Timmons and Cody Myers. It's a very funny comedy news show, and I do this little segment called In Other News, where I just do more of those monologue jokes. I like writing sketches. I drive Uber for work also, so I make. I recreate Uber stories that happened in the car, but I do it with comics as the actors, and that's a lot of fun to do. I just, honestly, I want to be creative in however way I can. So like this upcoming Monday, I go to Edinburgh for the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. I'm going to be there for a month, and I'm going to be bringing all my camera equipment and a couple buddies, and we're just going to be filming like vlog type things, but like, the way I'm thinking about it is it's funny people encountering a foreign culture. And I'm just going to try to create that the best way I can.
What is the festival?
Have you ever heard of the Fringe Festival?
No, I haven't heard of it.
So the Fringe Festival is the world's largest theater festival. And basically what happened was after World War II, Edinburgh, Scotland, created this thing called the Edinburgh International Festival. And that was based solely on like, theater performances, dramatic arts, maybe some classical music here and there. And that was within the heart of Edinburgh. But there were a lot of people, a lot of performers that wanted to perform that were not allowed to because they weren't accepted into the festival. So what they started to do was perform in the bars and pubs on the outskirts of this festival, the Fringe. Mm-hmm. And then, people liked it. It started doing better. And 70 years later, it's the world's largest festival.
Wow.
And so for 1 month in August, I'll be in Edinburgh, Scotland, and I have my Bomb and Get Bombed show, which is a stand-up drinking show. And I'm going to be doing it 26 times over a 28-day period. And, yeah, I'm just...
Dude, that is going to be so fun. That's going to be a blast.
It's crazy. And do you know what the wildest part is? How many performances do you think happen at the Fringe per year? And I'm talking in venues, not even including street performances.
Is it open all year long, or
it's just open for August for those 28 days?
Oh, I have no idea. It seems like
3,000.
Yeah, thousands. That's
3,000, 2,500 a day.
Wow.
So you go there and you're just like bombarded with people handing out flyers. Come to see my show. Come to see my show. There's fire eaters, sword swallowers, magicians, mimes, singers, rockers.
How'd you
comedians.
even hear about this?
I heard about it because in 2016, Hannibal Buress did a documentary called Hannibal Takes the Fringe. And he went there and he did his hour-long special for 28 days, probably did it 50 times, taped it all, and just released it. I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to perform in the UK. I want to get in front of audiences that I would otherwise have no opportunity to get in front of.
Yes.
And I want to grow as a comedian. And nothing's going to make you grow than I'm looking at like 25 minutes a night for a month straight.
That is going to be a huge growth.
Yeah. So I'm going to be doing a lot of writing. I'm going to be doing a lot of content. I'm going to be doing a lot of, networking, if we will, just fucking hanging out at a pub, drinking a beer with
and just
other
hanging out in
comedians.
Scotland.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be a fucking blast. Well, that's very cool, dude. So what else you got going on in the comedy world here in Austin?
So every single Thursday I run a show with the same show that I'm bringing to Edinburgh. It's called Bomb and Get Bombed. And I'm still going to be doing it during August.
Where do you host that?
It's at a bar called Poor Choices on 6th and Trinity.
Cool.
And I have 3 guest hosts while I'm away. And basically the way the Bombed show works is kind of talking about that, what we said earlier, which is keeping people honest and in the moment and like having that connection. It takes 6 comedians, each person doing about 10 minutes. But every time they say a joke that doesn't get a laugh, the host drops a sound effect. And then that means you have to take a drink on stage.
Oh, hell yeah.
But because fair is fair, every time a comedian has a great joke, the host drops a different sound effect, and the audience has to take a drink.
Oh, yes. Let's all get plastered.
So, yeah, it's a big fun party. And what I like about it is, you know, it takes a bad joke and it lets everyone in the room know, yeah, we're all on the same page. That sucked.
Yeah.
And it's like a free laugh.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so it's fun. It makes all bad jokes into good jokes, and people just get to have fun, have a drink, and enjoy themselves. So I do that every single Thursday at Poor Choices at 9 p.m.
That's fucking cool.
Yeah.
Well, man, I really respect your work ethic. I love your vibe. I love your comedy. I think you're going to do really well over the next couple of years.
Yeah, dude, this is a sick podcast. So thank you for having me on.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure. Thanks so much, Jimmy. All right, see you guys.
Peace.